I had been home for 2 weeks when my father's old military friend came to visit. The house felt quieter than I remembered, its silence stretched between the tick of the hallway clock and my mother's soft humming from the kitchen. My father, Colonel James Hart, carried the same discipline even in retirement. Every morning at 6, he'd polish his boots though there was nowhere to march. I often wondered if he missed the war more than he missed living. When he told us that Michael Grant was coming, his tone carried a warmth I hadn't heard in years. "We served together in Bosnia," he said, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. "Solid man. Haven't seen him in nearly 2 decades. My mother smiled politely, as she always did when the past came up, a small, contained smile that never quite reached her eyes. By afternoon, the air turned heavy with the scent of rain. A dark sedan pulled into the gravel drive, crunching to a stop. My father straightened his shoulders, suddenly younger, almost proud. I followed him out to the porch, my hands shoved in my pockets. Michael stepped from the car with a kind of quiet certainty. He wasn't tall, but something about his posture, solid, balanced, made the space around him feel smaller. His voice, when he greeted my father, was deep but soft-edged, as if used to carrying commands yet choosing gentleness instead. "James Hart," he said with a grin, extending a hand. "Still standing straight as a rifle." "Michael Grant," my father replied, gripping his hand. "You look like hell." They both laughed, the kind of laughter men share when it carries years of memory and loss. That I hovered behind them until my father gestured toward me. "My son, Ethan. He's just finished university. Still figuring out the world." Michael turned to me. His eyes held something searching, curiosity, maybe recognition. "Good to meet you, Ethan," he said, and his handshake was firm but not hard. "Your father saved my life once. Thought I'd see the man who made that kind of son." I didn't know how to answer, so I nodded, feeling strangely aware of the weight of his gaze before he turned back to my father. Inside, my mother had set the table, her gestures neat and practiced. She welcomed Michael with tea and stories she didn't quite belong in. As the two men spoke, the air filled with names I didn't know, places I'd never seen. Their voices drifted between pride and nostalgia, like soldiers walking through FOG.AT dinner. Conversation turned lighter. My father told a story about an ambush gone wrong, and Michael's laughter filled the room, low, sincere, almost musical. I found myself listening more to the sound than the words. When he spoke, he looked at people fully, as though his attention was a gift. "So what about you, Ethan?" Michael asked. "What comes next?" I hesitated, stabbing at the potatoes on my plate. "Honestly, I'm not sure yet. Maybe something with writing." "A storyteller," he said thoughtfully. "That's a brave thing. Telling the truth when no one wants to hear it." Something about the way he said it, measured, unhurried, made me look up. His expression was unreadable, but the warmth in his tone stayed with me long after the subject changed. When dinner ended, my father brought out a bottle of whiskey. "For old times," he said, pouring 2 glasses. My mother excused herself early, tired perhaps of the smell of old memories. The rain began outside, soft at first, then steady. I offered to help Michael carry his bags upstairs. The hallway light flickered as we reached the guest room at the end. He set the bags down and turned toward me with a quiet smile. "Thank you, Ethan. It's no trouble." For a moment, neither of us moved. There was only the faint sound of rain tapping against the window. He looked at me, not just at me, but through me, as if searching for something he hadn't seen in years. Then he blinked, nodded once, and the spell broke. "Good night," he said gently. "Good night, Mr. Grant." Back in my room, I could still hear the muffled rumble of the 2 men talking downstairs. Their laughter echoed faintly, steady as the rain. But beneath it, my thoughts circled that look, the brief flicker of recognition in Michael's eyes that made my chest tighten with something I couldn't yet name, and for the first time in months, I found myself unable to sleep. Morning came soft and gray, the sky still rinsed with last night's rain. I woke to the smell of coffee drifting through the hallway and the sound of my father's voice booming from the kitchen. By the time I came down, he and Michael were already seated at the table, laughing about something I hadn't heard. My mother hovered nearby, her movements quiet and deliberate, as though she were careful not to disturb a fragile peace. "Morning, son," my father said without looking up from the newspaper. "Michael's helping me fix the old fence later. You should give him a hand." I nodded, pouring myself a cup of coffee. Michael's eyes followed the motion, steady but unreadable. "If you're up for it," he said. "I could use someone younger to hold the board straight." Outside, the air smelled of wet earth and pine. We worked in near silence at first, passing tools, aligning panels, hammering nails. The occasional creak of wood broke the rhythm. Michael moved with the quiet precision of someone who'd spent years relying on discipline. His sleeves were rolled up, forearms streaked with sawdust, and every motion seemed deliberate, economical. After a while, he glanced over. "You and your father get along?" I hesitated, tightening my grip on the plank. "We coexist." He smiled faintly. "That's a polite word for something heavier." "He's different," I admitted. "I think he only knows how to talk to soldiers." Michael paused, driving a nail in cleanly. Men like him were taught to survive, not to feel. Sometimes the battlefield follows them home. The words lingered, settling deeper than I expected. There was no judgment in his tone, only understanding. I found myself wanting to keep him talking that we worked until noon, sweat clinging to our skin despite the cool breeze. When we finally stopped, he handed me a bottle of water. "Good work," he said. "You've got your father's focus." "I'm not sure that's a compliment," I replied, half smiling that he laughed softly, and for a moment the space between us felt smaller, less defined by age or circumstance. After lunch, my father left for the hardware store, muttering something about needing replacement bolts. My mother retreated to her sewing room upstairs. The house fell into an unusual quiet. Michael and I ended up in the garage, where an old motorcycle sat under a dusty tarp. He brushed his hand across it with something like reverence. "Your father and I built this before deployment," he said. "Never thought I'd see it again." I lifted the tarp completely. The bike's frame was rusted, the paint dulled by years of neglect. "Think it still runs?" I asked, with a little faith. He smiled. "And patience." We worked side by side, wiping, tightening, adjusting. Grease marked our hands. Each time our shoulders brushed, a jolt of awareness ran through me. I caught him watching once, just a glance, but his expression softened when our eyes met, something restrained, something cautious. "You ever feel like you don't quite fit where you're supposed to?" I asked without thinking that he leaned back, wiping his hands with a rag. "All the time," he said. "Most of my life, I've been standing half in the shadows, pretending it's enough." The air thickened. I wanted to ask what he meant, but his eyes told me not to. There was a gravity there, a shared understanding neither of us wanted to name. When the bike sputtered to life, the sudden roar filled the garage. We both laughed, louder than we needed to. It broke the tension for a moment, but when the sound faded, silence returned heavier than before. Evening settled in. My father was still out, the sky painted with the orange remains of daylight. From the porch, we watched the clouds drift over the hills. Michael poured 2 small glasses of whiskey, offering one to me. "Your father would kill me," I said. "He doesn't have to know." The liquid burned down my throat, sharp and warm. He sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the faint heat of his arm. "Ethan," he said quietly, "don't let fear make your choices for you. It's a prison that looks like safety." Before I could answer, thunder cracked in the distance. The storm returned, sudden and fierce. We ran inside, laughing, half-drenched. The power flickered out, leaving only the glow of a single candle my mother kept on the counter. In that fragile light, Michael reached for my shoulder, steadying me, maybe, but his hand lingered. The moment stretched, wordless. I met his eyes, and everything unsaid pressed between us. Then he pulled back, breath unsteady. "We should check the windows," he murmured, but the touch stayed, even after he stepped away, and that night, lying awake in the dark, I realized something dangerous had begun. The storm passed sometime before dawn, but the silence it left behind felt heavier than thunder. I woke to the faint hum of the refrigerator and the smell of rain seeping through the open window. My father had already left for town. My mother's sewing machine whirred faintly upstairs. The house was breathing again, but unevenly, as though aware of what it didn't yet know. Michael was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, frying eggs in a cast-iron pan. He looked up when I entered, eyes soft but guarded. "Morning," he said. "Morning." My voice came out thinner than I meant that we ate in silence. Every scrape of the fork sounded too loud. Finally, he cleared his throat. "About last night," he began, not meeting my eyes. "I shouldn't have. You didn't do anything wrong," I said too quickly. His mouth lifted in something close to a smile, but it faded almost immediately. "Ethan, I've spent half my life pretending not to feel things that mattered. I don't want to start again here." The air shifted. My pulse quickened. I wanted to ask what he meant, but the words tangled somewhere between my chest and my throat. After breakfast, we walked outside, following the muddy trail that led to the back field. The world smelled clean again, grass, wood, wet air. He walked ahead of me, his hands tucked in his jacket pockets, shoulders tense as if bracing for something unseen. "You know," he said finally, "when you're in the service, everything's simple. Orders. Duty. Loyalty. You don't have to ask who you are, you just obey." He stopped, turning toward me. "But when it ends, you're left standing in the quiet, wondering what parts of yourself were lost in the noise." I watched him carefully. "And what did you lose?" He exhaled, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Someone I loved. A man named Daniel. He died overseas." I never even got to tell him what he was to me. The confession landed between us like a stone dropped in still water, no shock, just the deep echo of something inevitable. I didn't speak, I couldn't. The part of me that should have been surprised wasn't. "I've never said that out loud before," he continued. "Not to your father. Not to anyone. You trusted me with it," I said quietly. He nodded once, his expression unreadable. "Maybe because I see something familiar in you." The honesty in his voice stripped away the last of my hesitation. "I don't know what I am," I admitted. "I thought I did." But when I'm around you, everything I've tried to define myself by starts to blur. He looked at me then, really looked. No disguise, no restraint. Ethan, he said softly, you're allowed to feel what you feel. Even if it scares you. The space between us vanished without warning. I didn't think, I just moved, or maybe he did. Our shoulders brushed, then our hands. A single second stretched impossibly long before he reached up and touched my cheek. His palm was warm, steady. Tell me to stop, he murmured, but I didn't. The world seemed to narrow until it was only breath and nearness. The faint smell of rain still clung to him, mixed with the sharp scent of soap and wood. When our lips finally met, it wasn't rushed. It was careful, two people afraid of breaking something fragile but already too far gone to turn back. When he pulled away, his breath trembled. This shouldn't have happened, he whispered. Then why does it feel right? I asked. He shook his head, stepping back. Because feelings don't follow rules. And sometimes, that's the problem. For a moment neither of us spoke. The sky had cleared to a thin, pale blue. I could hear a bird somewhere in the trees, singing as if nothing in the world had changed, though for me, everything had. We walked back to the house in silence. At the door, Michael paused. Your father's been my brother in every way that matters. I won't betray that. I swallowed hard. You already haven't. He gave a small, sad smile. You're young. You'll understand one day how complicated love can be. He turned and went inside, leaving me on the porch with the echo of his words. I stood there for a long time, staring at the faint reflection of my face in the rainwater pooled on the steps. He looked unfamiliar, like someone I hadn't met yet, and in that reflection, I realized the line between right and wrong had already blurred beyond return. The morning after felt heavier than any storm. The air inside the house seemed denser, as if holding its breath. I heard my father's voice from the kitchen, brisk, confident, alive in a way I hadn't heard before. Michael was with him, his tone calm, deliberate. They were planning to visit the old Veterans Hall that afternoon. Listening from the hallway, I felt like an intruder in my own home. When I entered, both men looked up. My father smiled briefly, gesturing toward the coffee pot. Morning, son. You're up late. Michael and I are heading out for a few hours. Michael's eyes met mine only for a second. A flicker of recognition, quickly buried beneath composure. We'll be back before supper, he said evenly. I nodded, pretending the casualness didn't sting. My mother was already setting the table, moving quietly between them like she'd learned to navigate a space full of hidden currents. When they left, she looked at me, her gaze unreadable. Your father's happier when Michael's here, she said softly. It's good for him. I forced a smile. Yeah. Good for him. But it wasn't good for me. The day stretched long and restless. I tried reading, walking, writing, anything to drown out the echo of what had happened. Every thought returned to that single moment in the field, his hand, his breath, the way the world had folded into something too real to ignore. Guilt pressed against the edges of my chest, but beneath it, something else pulsed, quiet, undeniable longing. They returned at dusk. My father was flushed with laughter, the kind that only came after shared drinks and old memories. You should have seen him, Ethan, he said, clapping Michael on the shoulder. Still sharp as ever. Could talk those old boys under the table. Michael smiled faintly. Your father hasn't changed much either. Still the loudest in the room. That night, dinner passed in a haze of conversation I barely followed. Every time Michael spoke, I found myself listening for what wasn't said. My mother caught me staring once and frowned, as if sensing something she couldn't name. Afterward, Michael stood to wash the dishes. I joined him without asking. My father had gone to the den, already halfway through another glass of whiskey. You shouldn't keep looking at me that way, Michael said quietly, his hand submerged in the soapy water. I can't help it, I whispered. He sighed, not turning toward me. You're young. You think love is something you chase until it catches fire. But love, real love, isn't supposed to burn everything it touches. I don't regret it, I said. What happened? He closed his eyes for a moment. That's what makes it harder. A glass slipped from his hand and shattered in the sink. The sound snapped the air between us. My mother's footsteps creaked in the hallway, but she didn't come in. Later, when the house settled into silence, I found him standing on the porch. The moonlight silvered the edges of his hair. He didn't turn when I stepped outside. I'm leaving in the morning, he said quietly. Your father wants me to visit again next month, but I won't. Because of me? Because of both of us. His voice trembled on the edge of something that might have been sorrow, or restraint. This house has too many ghosts already. It doesn't need new ones. I wanted to speak, to ask him to stay, but the words dissolved before reaching my lips. Instead, I stood beside him, shoulder to shoulder, our silence heavier than speech. Finally, he said, you have a kind heart, Ethan. Don't waste it trying to carry the weight of someone else's secrets. He reached out then, not to touch me, but to brush a raindrop from my sleeve. The gesture was small, almost fatherly, yet it broke something inside me more deeply than any embrace. When he turned to leave, I followed him with my eyes until the darkness swallowed his outline. The next morning, his car was gone. My father sat on the porch steps, a faint sadness in his expression that he tried to hide behind a mug of coffee. "Michael's a good man," he said. "One of the few I'd trust with anything." I nodded, unable to speak. The truth lay between us, invisible but vast. That evening, I went for a walk along the same muddy trail behind the house. The air smelled of pine and smoke. I stopped where the grass still bore faint imprints from our footprints days before. Standing there, I realized Michael hadn't broken anything in me. He'd simply revealed what had already been waiting, quiet, uncertain, alive. When I turned back toward the house, the first stars were coming out. Their light was distant, unreachable, but steady. And for the first time, I didn't feel lost beneath them, that I just felt awake.